Hello, everyone. You're welcome to the Center Stage podcast, a thought-provoking, deeply engaging, very inspiring podcast. We'll be taking you on a journey, so we want you to enjoy this ride with us. Joining me in the studio today, I have two delectable ladies.
Guess I'll start. In the streets, they call me Anto Lecky. Some people like to call me an activist. I don't like that term. I prefer advocate for good governance and gender justice. And I'm a budding politician, but I think we'll talk a little bit about that later. Yeah.
And I am Lois Sambo. I'm a climate advocate, actually, and a media professional. So, yeah, this is us.
Did you say climate?
Yes, climate advocate.
Oh, wow, interesting. So you see, we have extremely interesting guests in the house today, but let's talk about something that is common to all. And that conversation has a label, and it's called gender. Can I start with Lois? What does gender mean to you?
So when you say label, it actually just has a label and somehow a negative label. And so for me, gender, they're just roles anyways. Even though on the street, as Anto would say, when they say gender, the first thing that comes to mind for people is men and women. But I just feel for me, gender is just roles, roles that society attached to people. So, but because of the negative connotation when you say, we're talking gender, I have people tell me, this gender thing you're doing. So it's almost like gender is woman. So when they're talking about gender activists, the first thing that comes to people's mind is this person is a woman activist. But it's not necessarily about women. So when we're talking about gender, it could also be about men, about what men go through. It could also be about what women go through. But the reason why, I hope I'm not jumping the gun anyways, but the reason why people just attach it to women is because over time, women have begun to speak up against certain things that have been done against them. And I would say that's generally because of what society is and how patriarchal society is. And so because women began to speak, it began to look like a new thing and an anomaly. So every time a woman is talking about anything that has to do with women, it looks like she's being too aggressive. So it just made it have this negative connotation attached to it, but it necessarily is not. It's just for us to be humans anyway.
Thank you very much, Lois. Can I go over to you?
Sure. I'll just go back to in school. In school, they taught us there's a difference between sex and gender. Sex is the biological components that make a man or a male versus a woman or a female. Gender, like Lois was saying, are the traits, the attributes, the contradictions, and the similarities of these two, let's say male and female. But I definitely think that we can't forget to take into consideration that even in Nigeria or globally, what have you, we don't only just have man and woman anymore. We have trans, we have many things, so that's how we go into the idea of gender. It's the characteristics, because we have transgender versus transsexual. Some people may have not changed the biological parts, but they attribute themselves to be a woman, even though they were born a man, or, what have you. Again, like Lois said, when people think of gender equality, it seems to be a woman's battle, because it's usually a woman's conversation. It's usually because globally women are seen or known to be less financially buoyant, less educated, things like that. So usually gender equality is a women's conversation, but it doesn't only have to be. Like we said, boys go through issues, men go through issues. We now have trans issues and things like that, pansexual, asexual. There's many things that are going on right now, So, yeah. And I think it's good that we have these kind of conversations, because especially in a place like Nigeria, we have a little bit different gender issues than maybe if we want to call it the first world. I don't think they're first anything, but in the first world. So I guess we're also jumping the gun. Let's say we're talking about feminism, right? So feminism, when I was going to school in America, it was because of the glass ceiling, which is basically in employments where women were known to make 70% to the 100% of a man. So if a man was making $100,000 a year, most women would make $70,000 a year. In Nigeria, I don't think that's exactly the case. No, I'm not saying, I'm saying work in the, I don't know, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. In the workforce, I don't know. The reason I'm saying that is because in Nigeria, the data is there that women are the highest number of entrepreneurs in the world. So for me, I don't know all the data, but yes, we're doing it. So everything, guys, everything gender equality is not bad, okay? Let me just let you know. We're doing some things, women. We're out there, you know. So, so let's just say mostly feminism was based on the workforce, employment. But in Nigeria, most of us are running our own businesses, so you can't tell me that you make it more or less than me. That's whatever you want to say. So, but I do say that in Nigeria, most of our gender issues are more of our culture and our tradition. I think it's more based on that than work-wise per se. Yes, we do have economic issues, but that's generally because of our culture. Women are not supposed to make more than men. Not that we're not, you know, like we're not supposed to. So even if we're making it, we know they tell person, they hide, you know, we just pretend like we don't know what's going on. Honey, go and buy the groceries, but we could top his groceries. But, you know, so that's why I think our own issue here is more so cultural and traditional rather than formal structures of employment situations.
Yeah, I think I can share a very personal experience. And in my work as executive director of CCSI, I know a lot about gender. I even know a lot about the diversity, equity, all those, you know, definitions and stuff. However, I traveled to Malawi for a training, and this is really interesting. And I just finished conducting a gender training, and we are supposed to go on a tour to the safari. And the concern, my concern as the facilitator was to make sure that everybody was safe. And then I asked, who is our guide? And in my mind, I imagined a guide as a muscular man, you understand, with the guns. I said, Madam, don't worry, he's going to be armed, we'll be safe from the lions and all that. And then we entered the bus. And as soon as we entered the gate of the park, we were going to the office to pick up the guide. And I see a woman my size coming with what looked like an AK-47. And as I was about to board the bus, I said, oh no, she can't be the guide. I didn't feel safe. And then I realized in an instant, what had I done? I had stereotyped who I thought would be the guide that would keep us safe, thinking it would be a man looking muscular. So I think this gender thing, like I said, is a label. It's really an issue. And I like the angle at which you came at it as well, talking about the different dimensions of gender. But has gender actually affected you positively in any way? Let me start with you.
Positively, I guess we're going intimate. I guess we're going intimate.
It depends.
I won't lie. Part of the reason I'm living in this country, kudos to them, even though they drive me nuts, Nigerian men know their role as Nigerian men. Generally. Some of them are nuts and they're mad. But generally, the typical Nigerian man knows that he's supposed to be a provider. He's supposed to sustain. He's supposed to take care of his woman and whatever else is going on. I appreciate that a lot. I grew up in America, and most people are doing, it's not even 50-50 anymore. Women are doing 60, 70-30, different formulas. I'm not interested in that one. That's not for me. I like the fact that the typical Nigerian man knows, even if my wife is boxed up, I am still meant to provide for her. So it has benefited me in that regard, solely, because Nigerian men are something else. Anyway, but yes, solely, I do appreciate the fact that I think the typical Nigerian man knows that he's supposed to be a provider for his family.
Okay, so this now puts me to, I don't know if to ask, where the fight for, I don't know if to call it equity or equality now, because over time, I've heard men be like, my wife can't earn more than me. And then so it brings us back to this point where he says, it's because I'm the provider. And then so it brings us back to the issue where we're saying, why do you feel that she shouldn't earn more than you? There have been men that have said, my wife can't earn more than me. If she gets a job that pays her more, she wouldn't take it. And so that brings us back to that battle. How do we balance it now where you are the provider, I can earn more than you? I hope that's not a problem.
I don't think it's going to be a problem, but to answer your question, how do we bring in that balance? We're dealing with a society that is complex. We have different people with different outlooks, different experiences that really shape who we are. Let me give you another very hilarious example. At home, when I lose my car keys, I ask my sons. When I'm looking for an intimate piece of clothing, I ask my daughter, why? So somehow, you know, the stereotyped definitions of gender, they creep into who we are. And unknowingly or inadvertently, we transfer these interpretations down the generation. How do we make these changes? Making sure that women are empowered to do what they can do, not because they are female, but because they have the capacity. Making sure that men can do what they can do, not because they are masculine. And how do we complement both efforts? Activists, what do you
Again, like you said, it starts from the home front. Almost every gender role or gender suggestion that we learned it at home. Again, it's usually the girls that are in the kitchen while the boys are outside playing football.
My boys can cook.
Yes, now, because you're a great mom. But most of our parents, growing up, it was all of us girls. We were the ones in the kitchen while our brother was playing football outside or playing PlayStation or what have you. So it does start from parenting. As things like men always say that if my wife can't cook, I can't marry her or what have you. We're in 2024. Most of us have house helps. Like, who is cooking anyway? Like, or, what's really the big deal about who can cook? But people still have this kind of notion. However, cooking is a life skill. If you don't eat, you die. So it shouldn't be my wife or what have you. When the man is single, he finds food in one way or another. So now he's telling me that my wife, I'm hiring my wife. I was saying I'm hiring my wife to be a chef. Or whatever the English, because he would have hired someone to make his food any other way. So I definitely think it starts with the home front. And even dads. I think the first time I saw my dad make Quaker oats, I was just standing in the kitchen puzzled. I had never seen my father.
Never seen my dad cook. He has never cooked.
Exactly. So I was just in Awachi last week, and I saw my father boiling rice, and I just stood behind. I said, this guy can cook rice. But all my life, I was the one boiling rice. But you know how to do it, but you didn't do. What do you get? So it definitely starts from the home fronts. Like, everyone needs to, at least the basic things. There's some things that women take pride in. Most of us like to cook, or it's a prideful thing, but basic things, cooking, sweeping, making the bed, you should know how to do it. It's nothing. If you don't have a woman or a man in your life, there's some things that you should know how to do. Like, for example, growing up, my dad ensured that we knew how to change tires. I don't change them now, but if I had to, if I was in one jungle, I know how to do it. So it's just making sure that as a parent, those little life skills, you instill them into your child very, very early on. So I think that's the first step, the home front. I think sometimes with a lot of issues, we are taking on too many sectors at once. We're facing the home front, we're facing who we're dating, we're facing what we're doing in the office. It's many battles we're battling at once. I think sometimes we should just...
Warriors.
Yeah, sometimes we should just kind of slow it down and just... Let's try and... Small wins are big wins too. Yeah. Let's just make sure we're doing okay here before we now fight these ones there. So, yeah.
Well, for me, just like Anto said, it starts from the home front. And I think we were having this conversation one time with my colleagues, and I was saying the reason why it looks like feminism is toxic is because it's coming from a place of deep anger. So feminism is not necessarily gender equality and equity anyways, but somehow people just attach it to that. So anybody that is a feminist is just seen as a gender person. And when you say gender person, it means a woman person. But it's coming from a place of deep anger because over the years, for us as younger women, we may not really have experienced so much what older women went through when we talk about inequality, not even inequity, but inequality between the male and the female. So I remember when I was younger, my grandmom used to tell me that as a young wife, she wasn't allowed to eat egg. Yes, she wasn't allowed to eat egg because, I don't know, they call it in Hausa, but in English, maybe the word would be longer throats, that it would make them have longer throats, and then so they would begin to eat from the pot. But I'm like, she's the one cooking, for heaven's sake. Isn't she even entitled to have something to eat? And imagine those kind of cultures and those kind of traditions that had been passed down for some years, and then getting to a point where women say, this is enough. And coming out of that place, it's now with small voice that she will come out of that place where for years you've been subjugated. So for quite a number of women, when they're coming out to talk about these things, it's because of the long years of, how much women have been oppressed. But just like Anto said, it starts from the home front, where the mother actually teaches the son. Because when you look at it, women are, we always say it, ladies are raised, men are just left to learn how to live life by themselves. So they're struggling. You realize that we have, I don't want to say this, more culturally responsible women. So from a very young age, young girls already know how to kind of manage life. And that's why it's easier for women to get married quite early. A lady can get married at 18 and can somehow be able to manage a home. But I'm not sure an 18-year-old boy can get married and necessarily be able to take care of a home. That's because over time, they've just been let to live and just try to figure out life. But if we're, as parents, parents are deliberate in bringing up boys as well as girls, then we could start from somewhere. For the older boys and the older men, I'm not sure that there is any hope for them. But for the younger ones, I think we can start from now so that in the next 10, 20 years, we won't be having these issues anymore. Whatever we're trying to do now for the older men may not necessarily work. You take up policies and then 35% affirmative action last year. Imagine what was said, and you just imagine, for heaven's sake, don't these people have wives? Don't they have children? Why is this a problem for them to pass this into law? But if we can start training our younger boys from now and our younger girls as well, hopefully in the next 10, 20 years, some of these issues may not be the issues we'll be tackling.
Thank you very much. Maybe to follow on what you said about mothers teaching, fathers can teach too.
Yes.
So maybe already we are still bringing in gender is deep-seated. Yes. Then how do we demystify feminism and make it appear less toxic? I don't have the answer.
I don't know if there is an answer. Part of it, again, that's why I mentioned earlier that, growing up, when I was in school, feminism was based on the employment route. I think feminism has now, as they will say, guys will say Twitter feminist or things like that, it's kind of turned more into a man versus woman fight, which is not what it was supposed to, it's not what it's meant to be. It is meant to be literally the economic opportunities available for both genders. So if we can find a way to leave Chinedu dumped me for Bianca, if we can leave that conversation, if we can leave that and get back to the crux of the matter, the actual inequality and inequity that women face when it comes to men, if we can just get back to the purpose of the word feminism. It was not to, men don't realize, though, even women don't realize, feminism, it may have the word femme in it, but it's really supposed to help both parties. It's not supposed to be women better than or what have you. It's supposed to help both. It's supposed to show that also when men have their issue, they too can relate. That's how Canada just recently gave men, I think maybe 6 months paternity leave. I don't even think it's men that fought for it. I'm sure it's women wrote it on the protested for it or wrote the bill for it. So that would have never happened if there weren't feminists that believed that. I also want my husband at home when I'm having this baby. We did this thing together. Like I didn't do it by myself. Bro should be at home too. So that's what it is. So it's not, feminism not supposed to be I hate you, you hate me. It is, let's try and see gender-based, how can we balance it out? So in Canada, I think men have 6 months paternity leave or something like that, but women have like 18 months. Obviously, the woman is physically the one, nurturing the child, so she may require more months. But it shows that the man is also needed in this situation. So that's what it's supposed to be. Feminism is supposed to be the balance of genders, not the war of genders. Yeah. So if we can just have the conversations in that direction, how we can both benefit. It's not supposed to be one benefiting more than the other, or how can we both benefit from the gender sphere.
Yeah, and what works for you. My model won't be your model, and your model won't be somebody else's model. I know families where the wives don't love to cook, and they eat, and the men cook. But maybe they don't go out and tell their friends, my wife does not cook. However, right? But they manage the information in a way that benefits them. So I like what you said about how does it benefit. So in terms of mutual benefit, that's really important. What model works for you, and how do you curate that information to a point that it's just you. And let's not make all these things public. Everything nowadays is on social media. I do this, I'm on social media, and we begin to over-exaggerate the effects of this topic. So I think it's been a very, very interesting discussion today. And what would you tell your 18-year-old self if you were to address a young girl like you about gender wars?
What I would tell I'm not so far away from 18. I don't think I still want to feel young. Yeah. So for what I would tell my younger self, so for me growing up, I'm the only daughter, so I had my brothers. It was a privilege, not a privilege, because as much as my mom tried to involve all of us in things, especially things about running the home, quite a lot of the and if I say heavy lifting, it doesn't literally mean heavy lifting. I did it. I started experimenting to cook at the age of 8. In fact, for my for my brothers, I had to somehow tell my mom that this boy should start cooking. I think that was what even pushed her to start. So for what I would tell myself at 18 when it comes to is that I can do it. There's a lot that I can do. I didn't go into the sciences because I just felt like my head could not carry maths. There are a lot of other people, and we had more males actually in school. So whether I consciously said it, somehow in my subconscious, it was almost like it was for the men. But so what I would tell my 18-year-old self is, Lois, you can actually do it. There's nothing that is difficult, and you're human enough, because in the end, we're all human anyways. Just gender just separates us.
Thank you very much, Lois. And Anton, you've had the privilege of living outside this country, and now you're here. How would you tell a young girl to be able to have that confidence in terms of balance?
Sure, and funny enough, I do this often. Actually, I'm speaking to girls soon for the International Girls in ICT Day or something like that. And anytime I speak to girls, I always say that I pray or I have a dream for the day that we no longer need to have this particular conversation. We should not have Girls on ICT Day. We should just have ICT Day. What's the girl and boy? What's the big deal? As long as my fingers work and I can code and I can design a program, there's nothing spectacular. So I think it should just be work towards the day where your gender doesn't matter. Every single woman should do that in their own capacity. It shouldn't be, yes, the benefits are always going to be there. There's some things that work, women, we like when guys open bottles for us. There's little things, it's cool, it's cute, whatever. But everyone should work towards a day where their gender doesn't matter. I think that's key. Because I was just looking at something the other day that hopefully one day, if I'm ever, in a government position, some widows, that only existed, like widows exist, but the empowerment of widows only existed to me when I moved to Nigeria. In America, if your husband dies, figure it out. Just go back to work, take out life insurance, do whatever you need to do, leave me alone. But in Nigeria, we have widows empowerment programs. We ensure that we boost widows, and that's because in our culture, men are the providers. Meaning most times when your husband dies, you're at ground zero. You don't have anything doing. So again, it should be all women in their small capacity should ensure that they are trying to be economically relevant so that in case the provider is no more, they're not screwed. That's just what it is. Yeah, literally. So I think the goal is that every woman in your small capacity should try your best to be economically buoyant. And my own buoyancy may be different than yours. How I make my money or save my money or invest my money might be different than yours. But I think every woman in her small capacity, even if it's the people still just wrapping naira in their bra, whatever it is, women need to be economically okay in some way or another.
So it's been a very interesting conversation on Center Stage Podcast. Today we've talked about gender, how gender affects us as individuals, the interpretations of gender. Though we started by saying gender is a label, we are hoping that by listening to this podcast, you can begin to internalize your own personal reflections and make sure you're doing the best you can to demystify feminism, demystify gender, provide that balance for boys and girls, make sure that women and men have equal opportunities to shine. And Nigerians know they carry last. We can do it. Whether you're Yoruba, you're Igbo, you're Hausa, wherever you're from in Nigeria, let's work together and make gender a term that makes us smile. Thank you. And thank you to my guests, Antoine and Lois. You've been oh so delectable. The conversations have been very natural. And thank you very much. And hope to see you some other time.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having us.
Yeah.